Welcome this evening, and to join us, we're going to be talking about God using ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. I'm John Newton, science fiction author, and this show is also known as
the Apologetics Survival Guide for the Joe Rogan Experience.
That's part of it. We're going to be talking about a lot of things today. We've got on the docket, we've got the debate between Wes Huff, and then we got the Joe Rogan Experience that he's on, and then we've got a short-term missionary experience. The missionary is with us this evening. We're going to be talking to him, and we're just looking at how God uses people, ordinary people, in extraordinary ways. Now, we're going to find out Wes Huff is just not an ordinary guy, but still, I mean, basically, it was a St. Stephen's Acts 7 experience where he's just doing his thing. He's just, involved in life, and then boom, God pulls him out and uses him in a certain way and just sort of explodes. So we're going to go around and have everybody introduce themselves. I'm joined by...
I'm Eric from Your Brother in Christ. I do Christian apologetics, polemics, and evangelism, primarily focused on Islam itself and the references and their sources. So that would be me in a nutshell.
Okay, and since you're there, would you like to introduce somebody else who is on the screen and not showing her face, but she is here with us
Elle
this evening.
Can introduce herself.
Is she there?
I am. I'm Elle. I run LISO Elohim. I dedicate my life and my channel to God, specifically in the form of apologetics, polemics, evangelism, and edification.
And it sounds like you have somebody else there with you in the background. Either that, or is that on our side? Was it you?
No.
I also dedicate my life to those things as well.
the small ones. And we also have Seth. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. My name's Seth Wallace. I've been on this channel a few times now. I'm an aspiring science fiction author. I love God, and I had the pleasure of being able to be on my first missions trip just this past week. So I guess that makes me a missionary as well. So
there you go. There you go. We're going to hear about how God used you in that circumstance. And like I said, this is about how God uses ordinary people in extraordinary ways, unexpected ways, maybe is another way to say it too. It doesn't have to be, I just changed the entire world experience. It could be just also influencing one or two other key people in small areas maybe you're not even aware of that's happening. As Christians, we're called to be salt and light to the world, but that often means standing up against the cultural tide. We're also called to study to show ourselves approved unto God, 2 Timothy 2:15, and to be always ready to give an account for the hope that is in us, 1 Peter 3:15. But there are two problems with that. One, we often don't know what to prepare for and usually don't feel adequate when we do. There's a lot of feelings just generally of inadequacy. I'm not sure. I don't know. What can I do here? But, you look at Peter in Acts chapter 2 and boom, he was used in unexpected ways on the day of Pentecost coming outside. And there's this huge crowd saying, what's going on here? And he had to give a response on the spot. That's the first problem, that we do need to be prepared and we don't know what to prepare for and we feel inadequate. The second thing is we can't always orchestrate those events, those life-changing encounters. So we're going to take a look at these three events that I talked about, were ordinary people who were called by God into extraordinary events. First, there was a poll that I took, and I asked, if you go to the community page on this channel, you can see it. And I asked this question: which type of situation do you think God uses the most to shape ordinary Christians into extraordinary influencers? And these are the three options that were there. Number one, debating in some kind of public forum or just back and forth, maybe one-on-one. Number two, public platform and media. You have some kind of platform that you're speaking from. Number three, missions and helping those in need. And number four, daily life changes. This is which type of situation do you think God uses the most to shape ordinary Christians into extraordinary influencers. What do you guys think would be the biggest one? We got debating, public platforms and media. Those are the first two. Missions and helping those in need. And I think you got a bias there, Seth. And daily life changes.
I say daily life changes.
Okay, we got one for there.
I mean, I kind of agree, but I also feel like it's a trick question because God uses all the members of the body for all sorts of different things at the same time, all the time. So it's kind of like the answer, in my opinion, is like all of them in a way. I don't know if that's a cop out, but it's kind of how I see it.
No, I don't think that's a cop out at all. I think that's a pretty good answer. And we'll get to that in just a second. Elle, do you have a suggestion for that?
I would say I agree in the sense that all of them God is using all the time. I think in most people's lives, even when they are also used through debates and public platforms and such, they're also likely used through helping other people and through everyday life things as well. Typically, if you devote your life to God, you're going to continue to shine him through everything you do. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. Well, that was pretty much what the poll was on this, is daily life changes came up on top. And to be honest, this is a little bit of a, I don't know. It's kind of almost a trick question that all those are generally used or can be used for you. The question here was which was the ones that does the most. And we had some pretty good responses. One was from Joshua Wooden, who says, all the above. I would add suffering has an extraordinary way of drawing us closer to God, like Paul, as soul-building theodicies are a powerful and logical explanations for the problem of evil, pain, and suffering, like C.S. Lewis's book, The Problem of Pain. But to your question, it depends on a case-by-case basis. All right. Yeah, it does depend. It really does. Okay, and then Adam also said, it is that day-to-day grind and those super hard situations that you never thought that you could handle. But when God, brings me through, that gives me strength for the next time and forges me into a stronger tool. Like the folding of a samurai sword. The more it's doubled over and over and hammered flat, the stronger it gets. I thought that was a great analogy, man.
That's a good analogy.
So you're being formed into a sword.
Yeah, you got really poor metal to begin with.
Yeah, but that's not easy. So the first one we're gonna look at tonight is the debate. So on October 18th of last year, Wes Huff debated Billy Carson on the origin and authenticity of the Bible. Now, it wasn't really a debate, and I'm curious.
It was a bloodbath.
Somebody, if you didn't get a chance to see it, the link is in the description of this video. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. Did you guys get a chance to see it? Did you get a chance to see any of it? The whole thing or partial? Or
we did the whole thing. Elle and I.
Okay, great.
I didn't get a chance to see it personally, no, but I want to when this live stream is over. For sure.
I think it's. What would you guys say that it was the highlight of the debate? What would you say that was?
Highlight of the debate. This guy getting owned, unquestionably. I'd say the boss moment was when he reached behind him and grabbed a certain book and just pulled up the reference on a certain book. That would be, I think, my highlight. Because I've done debates before.
Yeah.
With someone who has a very, as Elle and I were going through this, we're like, oh, that just sounds like this other debater that I've had to deal with in the past. Yeah, as a debater, as someone who has done debates, it's really fun when you actually do your research and you have the references right there, and the guy's like, just hand wave.
Elle, what would you say was the highlight of that debate?
I was also going to say the book moment, but really, Wes showing he knows what he's talking about with confidence and no arrogance was just incredible to see over and over and over. Yeah.
Now I would say another highlight for me too was his patience in working with Billy, and then the highlight afterwards, because the video clip that I have on here is fairly lengthy, but it does show that partway through Billy had to leave, and it wasn't that he was running or anything like that. He had a previous engagement that he had to go to. And then that gave time for Wes to speak to, I think his name was either Mark or Mike, the debate host, the guy that was providing the forum for it. And Wes had said, "Hey, listen, I love Billy. I love him as a human being and want to see the best for him." And it wasn't there was no vitriol or any malice like that was given. Did that have the sense that you guys got?
I'd say from him, yeah.
Okay.
There wasn't, from one of the debaters, there wasn't any malice. From the other one, maybe a little bit of a different story.
Yeah, and I think he handled himself. Wes handled himself very well, and that sometimes people look just at that to say, if someone's calm, they don't get bent out of shape and patient with the other person, but firm too at the same time. People generally look at that and say, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. They won the debate just for that. Not even just listen to the logic, but listen how the person speaks.
Well, that comes to a lot down to culture.
Yes.
Because I know in the sphere that I go in, if it's a Muslim debater, if he's just yelling his head off, he will win the debate by the Muslims without actually even saying anything.
So the guy who's the loudest.
The guy's the loudest.
And can speak over the other person.
And he's the one most passionate
yes.
about the subject. He automatically wins, regardless of the knowledge or if he has a shirt on or not.
Because he is obviously right?
Yeah, he's obviously right, because no one that passionate that would take off a shirt in the middle of a debate would possibly be
he is speaking about somebody in particular.
Okay, so he didn't do it in a debate, but still,
it's not 2, it's 4.
It's like,
I don't have that clip. I don't have that clip. If I had that clip, I'd play it right now. You're not going to take your shirt off, are you?
No.
Okay,
I don't know. This thing on.
That's
it's winter. It's too cold.
That's right. Yeah, and I don't think, Seth, your shirt's staying. Right?
For now, yeah.
Okay, for now. All right. So I got a clip of the debate that I want to bring up, and it's very difficult to know when the best time to do this, to bring this up. But let's see here, there. It's difficult to know where's the best part to look into this one, but I think this might be a good spot.
Culture, and particularly in Greek and Coptic manuscripts. I actually have facsimile. So I have a photocopy that was done by the British Library of Codex Sinaiticus that I work with in my office. So I have it here. And the only reason I ask for clarification is because I want to make sure that what I'm addressing is actually what you mean.
Gotcha.
And not addressing something else. Because the Codex Sinaiticus in particular is just it's a 4th century Greek manuscript. Mm-hmm. It comes from approximately between 325.
So one of the things that he does here, and I like it because I use this with Muslims too, is make sure you know the definition. Make sure he's actually said what he means. Because you'll see afterwards how the Muslims will do the same thing, how they try to wiggle out of it and be like, oh, no. But he's very firm. He's got to confirm that this is what manuscript he's referring to. This is what he's talking about. Because if you don't establish that, then there are people who will try to slip out of it by any means possible.
Yeah. So what happened before this part that we're showing right here is that Billy was saying that, hey, there is a Bible that was written 1,000 years before the King James Version, and it doesn't have the resurrection or the crucifixion of Jesus in it. Resurrection or crucifixion? I forget.
Crucifixion of Jesus. Jesus was never crucified in it. Yeah, he's half right about that because it was written before the King James Bible. But it's very odd that that's the one he picks.
But it is definitely the resurrection and the crucifixion are in this, and that's where Wes is trying to clarify. He says because he said that the Sinai Bible, Billy had talked about the Sinai Bible. I think, what is the Sinai Bible? You can go to a Christian bookstore or look it up online. You're not going to find a Sinai Bible.
No.
And so Wes brings this up and says, "You talking about Codex Sinaiticus? Because that's a pretty famous codex. It's a Greek manuscript of the Bible. It's one of the manuscripts that we translate the New Testament from. And so it's got a really interesting history if you ever look into it. And so it really is Wes is just clarifying. He could have pinned him down and really made fun of him at this point, right?
Could have pinned him down. The fact that he doesn't actually know what the name is, the reference actually is. That he's referring to this as some sort of Bible, as if it's its own, like this was its own complete Bible, separate from anything else beforehand that only he knows about. Now, deceivers will do this. People who deceive, I've seen this definitely with the Dawa group. They'll take some obscure sort of text or reference and then try to sell it as this thing. And they'll definitely do this with like random verses from the Bible without including anything around it. Just throw this random verse out. And it's like, have you actually looked at it yourself? No, he's never actually looked at it himself. He's never actually read it himself. What do you think? Well, he got integrity?
Well, Billy had gone around. This is one of the things that Billy had done. And Billy Carson, I never heard of him until I heard about this debate and looked him up and got some background for him. So he believes some pretty strange things, like aliens have come to deliver these ancient civilizations and they delivered their knowledge and we've shared their genes because of the genetic experiments on us and yada, yada, yada. And there's some proof about this that's written in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, which are some Egyptian writings. Well, you find out, and Wes talks about it here, that the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, and Wes knew this. Wes had 24 hours to prepare for this, by the way, because the way that this debate had worked out is they had somebody else lined up, and he says, no, I can't do this. Wes was called in and said, here you go. Now, this is the type of stuff that Wes does. He's a PhD. He does. He is the director of the Canada Apologetics. Is that Elle? Is that correct? Canada Apologetics. Canadian.
It sounds correct. I'd have to verify.
Okay, we got two people there that just said yes. Okay, so that's good. So he's the director of that. He's got all this background. He's learned these other languages. Now I'm familiar with Greek and Hebrew, but nowhere near on the level where this guy is. And it just like this pops right off the top of his head. So when Billy brought up these Emerald Tablets of Thoth, I almost said Seth. Wes said that he said he know about this, and there is a guy that made it, and this is made it up, and it's on record, and nobody believes these. The guy who presented these didn't present the originals; he only presented his translation of them. The originals were never found. So he graciously pulled apart Billy's arguments.
This is what happens when someone that makes claims meets someone who actually
knows,
who's actually even read it.
Yeah, because he's blowing smoke all the time, and people just don't know. I say, "Oh man, I never heard of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. This might be something pretty cool," you know. So here we go. Is it going to play?
And a 350 AD, and its text of the Gospels reads almost identical to the modern Greek text that we develop translations from. So my curiosity is just simply in kind of exploring, when you say that it denies the crucifixion or that the crucifixion isn't there, I mean, I can go on right now, Codex Sinaiticus, and I can look up the end of, say Matthew 27, where it has Jesus being crucified, and that's in Codex Sinaiticus, or the John 19, or any of the other ones. So I think my confusion is that it doesn't read any differently. So actually, are you able to pull up a website with the viewers
I'm
or
looking
listeners
for-
or whatever
I'm
be able to
looking
see
for it
that?
right now to make sure I
What-
have the right
what-
the version that I'm looking at.
While he's pulling that up too, like I keep saying to all the people that aren't scientists traveling the world and linguists, I don't even know how to pronounce it the right way, like me.
Yeah, linguists.
What
Yeah.
cyanide? I keep thinking of cyanide, like the poet cyanide Bible. So
Right.
is that like a version? So from my own knowledge that I know, like when I really studied all this, what I thought was interesting.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there. I was thinking this is a part where he just turns around and pulls it off the shelf. Here's Codex Sinaiticus right here, and he says, "Okay, we look at it," and he pulls up. You can actually start reading it directly from the Greek. So, yeah, this is a guy that would put him in his place.
What's another telling thing for anyone that's watching is what. Can you pull them up again?
Oh, I'm
Keep
sorry.
forgetting. Yeah, just a reference.
The Bible was how many?
So Billy there, what he's done in reaction to this. The thing.
Yeah, I wanted to call that out too.
That is very telling because someone who is honest, who's honestly looking into this, you know what? If he hasn't actually done his research, maybe got swept up in like the fame of it, got a popular video that went viral that he really didn't put a lot of research into, and then it just starts steamrolling and just started rolling with it. But he honestly wants to know the truth, would stop and say, okay, hold on. You're saying that this reference actually does say the crucifixion, not what I've been saying about it. What exactly? Let me look this up. Which he does grab his phone and start looking things up at this point. But if he's honestly looking for truth at this point, he would start asking questions. You know, where's that reference from? Okay, let's double check this and so forth. And then after this debate, he would then look into it further, but that's not what he ends up doing.
No. Do you want me to play any more here on this one?
That you can if you want.
I'll just do a little bit more. I'm hoping it catches this one spot that I was looking for.
Like
on it.
different eyewitness. I studied C.S. Lewis back in the day, how many different eyewitnesses and stuff there were. And they went on purpose to mention so many other names that they were able to like cross-reference throughout history and throughout those times, from my understanding. And those were different things that I always thought were kind of interesting that I felt was a good concept of proof. And then I want Billy to answer. And also, I'm just curious, like the Sinai Bible, where was that piece
I found
discovered?
the text where I was referencing. Actually, I was misquoted. I misquoted there. It's the Gospel of Barnabas.
See, that's what they do. No, the pulling out the Bible was before this point, because he needed to make sure that he was actually going to that reference. That's why he was very thorough on saying, okay, this is what you're talking about right here.
Mm-hmm.
At no point, I've done this with Muslims whenever I talk to them about the fact that they can pray to that Muhammad ordered people to pray to him. I've done examples say, well, if I were to do, and I go through the exact same process, would that be considered shirk? And would that be absolutely a huge sin? And they're, oh yeah. Well, then you got to make sure that, okay, then when he does this reference here, they can't get out of it.
Yeah.
But you see how he tries to backpedal and immediately move to, well, I meant this over here, this obvious forgery who's been confirmed over and over and over again. That's what I was actually referring to.
So that's what happens next here is that Billy says, no. It was the Gospel of Barnabas. Most people don't know anything about that. They didn't even know it exists. Well, let's see what happens next, because it's just classic.
Okay, yeah. Well, so that's good. So let's deal with that too, because I've actually worked with. There are two manuscripts of the Gospel of Barnabas. The Gospel of Barnabas is a really interesting document because it is a known forgery, and so that's why I think it's important to get to these sources. So at the very start of the Gospel of Barnabas, which we only have two copies of, one is in Italian and one is in Spanish. We see right off the bat that the Gospel of Barnabas, not to be confused with either the Epistle of Barnabas or the Acts of Barnabas, which are two apocryphal documents from the 2nd century, but the Gospel of Barnabas in particular, we know it's a forgery because...
Now, watch his body language over here. Billy is like, okay, I got nothing to...
What Billy is doing is he's just using documents that not a lot of people know about.
Right.
And he's just throwing them out there and saying, this is what this says. And this, tell you the truth, Muhammad did this a lot. But this is what this says, and this is what this says, and that's it. And people would just take him on the word. But in this situation, he's gone up against someone who's actually read these documents and are familiar with these documents and are like, that's not what it says.
So to be honest with the title of this live stream, Wes is not an ordinary guy, but he was just being like Stephen, washing. If you read what Stephen said in Acts 7 about, he's coming out and he gives all these responses, the Sanhedrin, he's just spouting off Hebrew history and draws everything right directly to Christ. It's like, whoa, where's this guy? And all he was doing was tending tables earlier because they had, the problems with divisions and stuff. And God used him in an extraordinary way, and that's what happens here. And we'll see where this goes from this part too.
Now, not to downplay the amount of knowledge he has, he only had a couple hour notice of this. 24-hour notice of this event going on. But if I was in Wes's shoes on this, the first thing I would have done is probably watch like every video of his I could possibly see, and then I would. This is what I did with Nadir, even when I debated him, is I tuned my arguments to debunk what I knew he was going to go to due to his past. And anyone can do that. Definitely someone who's like well known and have a whole bunch of videos out online.
Yeah.
You can be like, okay, well, what are these guys going to do? What are their default arguments? Because with this gentleman here and the Dawaists that are out there, their arguments are always the same. They're cookie cutter arguments that they just go back to repeatedly, even if they've been proven wrong on them.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was come up and I don't know. It's just like boom, fell for it. Now you could watch Billy's body language coming back, and it's like, okay,
he looks scared.
Number 2 isn't working. What's that?
I said he looks scared. Like
the fallout for this was pretty nasty for him. Yeah, he's tried legal. He's tried a lawsuit against this. He's tried a cease and desist order to get them to take down the videos. He's done a lot of things because this is really putting a bad name. In fact, he came out in such an attack that it made things worse.
Oh yeah. The like I was saying, his paying attention to his reaction to this, Billy's reaction to this, is extremely telling, because the only type of person that would act this way is someone who knew they were deceiving, who knew they were lying, who had no clue what they were talking out of their rear end, and they realized that their entire structure, their entire organization is going to crumble because of this, and basically this is going to ruin their lives. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Thaddeus do something on this?
Yeah, Thaddeus was doing a live stream reviewing Billy Carson's follow-up video. During that live stream, Billy Carson actually took down the video. It was pretty bad. Now, there are still at least clips of it circulating, thankfully. For example, in one section, Billy Carson followed up by saying, in regards to the lawsuits and stuff, I don't care if you win or lose. I just want you to spend money. Like,
I think it's pretty much that it's actually, he knew it was false claims he was making. He doesn't care if they're false. He just wants them to spend money on it to defend themselves. And that is a form of contempt of court.
Yeah, you're using law. It's lawfare.
Yeah, not legal. Definitely criminal activity there.
So I've got a couple of things from the chat I'd like to bring up. One was from Thomas Hall saying, as good as Wes's arguments, his demeanor was the best part. If you do get a chance to watch the entire debate, like we said earlier, that seemed like it really came through. It not only exuded confidence, I think it also exuded real not, I don't say so much compassion, but genuine concern that Wes had for the other two guys.
And it seemed this wasn't like a really strict. It didn't look like a really strict formal debate style.
No, it was more
This
of a
is
conversation.
definitely more laid back. The moderator is getting involved, talking.
Oh yeah, annoyingly so.
Yeah, that's bad debater. Bad, not debater, but bad
Moderator.
Moderator is supposed to be impartial. I have moderated debates before. You're supposed to be impartial. I ended up getting on the Christian more than a Muslim anyway. Not debate, but they're supposed to be impartial. And they're supposed to just keep the rules going. This was obviously not a formal debate. This was very relaxed, and if it was a formal debate, it would have been much, much worse.
So we got another comment from Nicodemus. He was saying about an hour in, he did finally lose his patience slightly, but you have to look hard to notice it. And Thomas Hall also mentioned Billy's response of, okay, let's move on, was the only smart move he had. It was like watching a chess game with every piece taken, not even chess. It's more like checkers. I would agree.
Yeah, and I've again, going back
right?
to Nadir, who's a debater, that's a lot of the style he'll use with that.
Right.
Let's just move on. Okay, no more talking about that topic. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Because you lost. You lost that point.
I'm a child. I don't want to continue this conversation anymore. I want to move on to something else that I think I can get you on.
So let's see what happened next here in this debate.
Does things like in chapter 92, it says that Jesus spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then he came to the Jordan River and he walked to Jerusalem. But Mount Sinai is more than a week's journey away from Jerusalem, and neither Mount Sinai nor Jerusalem are close to the Jordan River. So never mind there not being a route from the Jordan River to like around Mount Sinai or going to Jerusalem. But there are internal problems with the Gospel of Barnabas, which indicate that it shows no actual indication of evidence of coming from or even having knowledge of first century Jewish understanding. It actually says Jesus is the Christ, but not the Messiah, which indicates that whoever the author is, he didn't know that those were the same words. And I think a bigger problem is that the Gospel of Barnabas actually paraphrases Dante's Inferno, which was written in 1314. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of internal evidences that disqualify the Gospel of Barnabas, never mind the fact that we don't have any evidence of it prior to the 14th century, and none in any other language other than Middle Age Italian Italian and Spanish. But the internal content of the Gospel of Barnabas disqualifies it from being ancient. And then the fact that it's doing things like paraphrasing Dante, or it also refers to a rule of the time of Jubilee, which was changed in the Middle Ages from what it was in the biblical year of Jubilee. And it goes with the Middle Ages concept, not the ancient concept. So I think what I'm getting at is, so I'm a historian, yep, and I deal with sources. So when I'm looking at sources, I want to make sure that I have a methodology by which I approach any type of source. So if there is something that denies the crucifixion, I want to make sure that I'm analyzing it and that the methodology by which I analyze it actually reveals that the content can be accurately tied to the event. So if we're talking about, say, Codex Sinaiticus, that's in the 4th.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. So basically he is saying that, hey, look, there's methods to do this. There's a process. At this point, I was hoping it would show up, but I think it's a little bit later. Billy just says, okay, never mind about those two. I'm going to throw something else at you. And he goes from there, and he talks about how the oral tradition is showing all this stuff about aliens and everything. And unfortunately for Wes, the video starts going in and out through technical difficulties, and he can't really respond any more than he already had here. Very much. I mean, he does, but it's difficult for him to come in. The problem is that the stuff that Billy is saying is all oral tradition, which is fine, except there are ways to look at oral tradition that are different. And Wes started asking, what methods are you using? And there was nothing. Billy didn't have any kind of methodology to verify the oral. What he was being told was actually kept as oral tradition. So it was a bit of a mess. So Would you say that you're already saying, Eric, that the debates that you had would be very similar to some of the ones that you had for Muslims, and you're watching his body language and his approach, his tactics, and coming back?
It's very, very similar, mirroring almost a one-to-one. It's very weird, but it's it's the same sort of aspect. If someone has actually done their research, they know that this is garbage. That's not actually true, and that this is just fraudulent. Sadly, this is something that I've seen happen quite a few times. Now, I do like the fact they actually pull it up, because Muslims will go to the Gospel of Barnabas as well.
They will
go to that, and they'll point to it and say, see here, it aligns with Islam more than it does Christianity in a lot of ways. And again, there's no evidence of it any earlier than 13th century, and it's most of the time considered a 13th century text, which, if you're familiar with the formation of Islam, that's a little bit afterwards.
So we're going to look at the next one. Was after this debate, Wes was invited on the Joe Rogan Experience, because it was a little bit different. It was more than just a regular. I don't know why this hit the traction that it did as much, because maybe it was the familiarity with Billy Carson, the people, the popularity that he had, and it was just basically totally lost this whole thing. And then when Wes was brought in to talk to Joe Rogan, it was interesting. He had said some things about Joe Rogan in his previous lectures. So this is what Wes had been saying about Joe. He'd even mentioned him. He said that Joe views the Bible. You got to be careful when Joe's out there and Joe brings guests on. Joe views the Bible as being the product of a bad telephone game. And that's basically somebody told somebody, and someone told somebody, and then someone else, and you get lost in your transmission. And it was also, a lot of people have the vague concept that the Bible is nothing more than translations of translations, and maybe somebody got in there and made some changes, and some king got in there and said, I don't like that part, take that out. And finally we get some corrupted bastardization of whatever the original was. And so that's what Joe had in mind based on some things that he said in the past. And so now this opportunity opens up to Wes to talk to the guy that he had spoken about before. And Joe's not the only one who's had these thoughts about the Bible, both Old and New Testament. Is there another group that has talked about this?
Oh, yeah. Muslims talk about it being corrupt. The Bible's been corrupted. I've had it's a translation of the translation claim more times than I can count. I'm sure that Elle has run into this quite a few times as well.
Mormons do it a lot too, actually, and Jehovah's Witnesses.
I've even run into it with someone who had grown up Catholic and then left the faith, and had said similar comments. How can we trust it when it's just been a translation of a translation? And thank God she realized that that's not accurate, and we were able to discuss through it. And she has dedicated her life to Christ now. But it is crazy how prevalent that idea is, even though it's so horribly inaccurate. And even saying things like earlier, and I know you guys briefly mentioned it, the whole, well, this was written, before the King James Bible. It's like, well, okay, but the King James Bible is like a translation. It's not just like the first end all be all.
Right.
And it's not even the first English translation either, because there was another one prior to it. It was just the most popular English translation.
Yeah.
That was it.
And in order for it to be like a real translation, you have to go back to the originals. You're not supposed to just have translations of translations. Like that's not the scholarly basis of how we do things at all. So, right. But for whatever reason, this is still such a prevalent idea, and I'm glad that it is being debunked, because it really is in all kinds of different circles, atheist circles, deconstruction circles, Muslim circles, and more.
Yeah, that's why I'm so glad that this opportunity presented itself to Wes. Of all the people for Joe Rogan to have on his show, this is a guy who can present it well. If you get the chance, I have a link for this video too that's in the description, and you can check that out. But I'm going to bring up part of it. I'm going to have to kind of juggle things around a little bit. But I'm going to bring up this video, and we'll see if I can catch the right spot. Did I bring it?
Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out. The Joe Rogan Experience.
Okay, so now I got to queue up to the right spot. Please bear with me. I think right around in here someplace. Oh, the resolution on this is so bad. I think we'll try right there.
Or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over, age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible...
For a helpline for gambling addiction?
Yeah, they have to
This
put that
version of the Bible, or the stories in the Bible. Is it the Dead Sea Scrolls, or are there older versions?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are the oldest of the Old Testament. So when they were discovered, so they were discovered in 1946 to 1957. And at that point, during their discovery, they pushed back a lot of our previous oldest manuscripts 1,000 years, which was a big deal.
How old are they?
They're anywhere between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century BC. So it's kind of tricky because the Dead Sea Scrolls they're like a library that we refer to. So it's approximately 970 documents, but it's distributed out between 10,000 and 11,000 fragments. So there's a lot going on there, right? So, and some of these, are so fragmentary that you look at them and it's like confetti, because they're, 3,000 years old, but not quite that. They're like 2,000 plus years old. Right?
Animal skins too, right?
Yeah, well, all sorts of things: animal skins, papyri, and then some of them are actually done on copper.
Really?
They're like inscribed in copper.
Oh wow!
Yeah, one of the coolest ones. Actually, this relates because I know you're a Marco Allegro guy. The first time I was introduced to Marco Allegro was not his Sacred Mushroom and the Cross stuff, but he published a book on what's called the Copper Scroll, because part of the Dead Sea Scroll fragments is this inscribed document on copper, which is an ancient treasure map.
Can you see it? Is it online?
Yeah, Jamie, pull up the, hey.
There it is. Wow.
Yeah. So it's in Hebrew, and it is wild. So it has these sites where it says buried treasure is found.
Whoa.
And there have been a number of guys who have tried to look for it. And so...
Does it say what the treasure is?
Okay, so pretty much on this one, you see that he has an opportunity to go up and talk to Joe, and then of course Joe's audience as well, to say that, listen, we're not playing the telephone game here. This is archaeological evidence. We have textual evidence that goes back to the 1st and 2nd century. The earliest fragment is one of John's, and then Wes presents to Joe a framed facsimile of that fragment to him as a, here, this can go on your shelf. So every time you look at this, you know that God has preserved his word, and here it is. It's not the telephone game we're talking about. It's something that is far, far more substantial. It is the most well-preserved document of antiquity by far. And we did a live stream on this a while back, talking about how old the documents are versus like Homer, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and others that are gone there. And it just, the New Testament just blows those out of the water. They don't even come close. So, yeah, what are you guys' thoughts on the 3-hour Joe Rogan experience, where he's talking about everything from his experience as a missionary kid to his paralysis as a child. He suffered paralysis for a short time in his legs, and then went into sports. Wes is pretty buff. So all of that.
Seth, I know you haven't talked much, so do you want to go first or?
So because I was away in South Africa and have been so preoccupied with everything, I have not been keeping up with this particular topic as much as you guys have. So I'm kind of staying in the background a little bit since you guys know more about this, but I'm definitely going to go watch these when this is over because this is fascinating to me. But from what little bit of this I have seen, it looks like Wes did a phenomenal job of humbly and also very knowledgeably presenting the facts of the situation. And I do know like a little bit about the whole, like Joe Rogan's telephone idea of the Bible. And it's very annoying to me when I see people kind of spout that, because a lot of times they're very arrogant about it. And they're like, how could you believe this stupid book made by a bunch of goat herders 5,000 years ago? It's like they don't even know what the heck they're talking about. They don't know that we have manuscripts from the first and second, century AD of the New Testament, and that it goes that far back, and it's like identical to the basic, like the message has been preserved, so that like the 432,000 whatever changes in the manuscripts they talk about are like so minor, it makes no difference whatsoever to the message. It's like little grammatical things of like where a comma is at, stuff like that. Right. And so, it's like it's not a telephone game. And I think from what I've seen, Wes presents that very well in a way that's also friendly and like enjoyable to listen to. So it's not arrogant at all. So from what I've seen, that's the vibe that I'm getting. And I really like that. So I look forward to watching the whole interview.
Yeah. Elle, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, there were a bunch of little things that were mentioned throughout the live stream that I found so fascinating. For example, he got a bit into textual criticism. He discussed a little bit about how we have even more manuscripts from the New Testament later, like further back than we do of the Old Testament, and got into that a bit, which was interesting. But two things that really stood out to me. One is I am so glad that he talked about the reliability over and over and over. And what I mean by that is one of the things that he brought up, for example, was Beowulf. And I'm not as familiar with this as others. I'm sure both of you guys shaking or nodding your heads rather know a ton more than I do, because frankly, a lot of history I just don't care about. I find it uninteresting. This stuff I do find interesting. Anyway, all that to say, there are so many things, for example, like Beowulf, that we're just like, well, this is what we've got. We've got to go with it. And we don't have anything to compare it to have any clue, is this the real deal? Is this the telephone game version? But versus the New Testament and the Old Testament, we have copies and copies and copies and copies from all over, to the point where we know, even when there are those typos, so to speak, obviously even prior to being typed, but even when there are those types of mistakes, and they did give several examples, we can track that to where that was, to when that was, to what that was supposed to be. Right. And it's incredible. So for example, atheists to take certain things in history that we have so little evidence, and they're just like, oh yes, of course, that's absolutely how it went. But then to like reject the Bible because, oh, well, that's just the Bible. No, they don't understand. There's such a broader context. I said there are two things. I'll add one more though. Just real quickly, one of the things that was really encouraging was seeing Joe Rogan even being anti-atheist in this, not in a, oh, you evil people, I hate you, or anything like that, but having his mind, seeing the way that he shifted from ooh, Bible thumper type mentality to like, oh, wait, no, I see that like actually the atheists have these things wrong, and listing some things out where they often stumble. The third thing is there are a few things that Wes Huff said that were not exactly presented in the best way, or he accidentally said one word instead of another. I found it very encouraging that when he was called out about some of these things, and I'm not even sure if he was called out about all of them, he made a response video to himself saying, oops, I meant to say this, or oops, I meant to say that. And he did it in a way that was just beautiful and wonderful and very appropriate for this channel because it was even sci-fi. But I found that so wonderful that he had that integrity to be like, oops, my bad. Thank you so much. You know, even if you're assigning ill intent to me in this, when I did not mean it with any ill intent whatsoever, even if you're assigning ill intent, thank you so much for calling these out, because how else would I improve if I don't realize, you know, where I was wrong? And so I think it's absolutely beautiful. So those are the things that I'll say.
Just before you speak, by the way, the link to that video where it's self-examination and stuff, that is also in the description of this video.
Now that's an indicator of someone who's actually looking for the truth, who cares about what they say, and that's factual, and is discovering, you know what, sometimes they make mistakes. Sometimes they don't say it the right. Maybe they're very good at book smarts, but not so good at presenting. Now, I think that Wes has a very good presentation and fantastic job doing that. But to be willing to go back and say, you know what, I might have made some mistakes, and here's how I need to correct myself, that shows integrity.
Yeah.
There's a couple other things on Wes. It's very interesting, definitely, with even that clip that we showed to Joe Rogan. It shows that he did his research. He knew Joe's position on things. He knew ahead of time. And again, it seems like a minor thing, but I can't stress how critical this is. Definitely, if you got an opportunity to speak to someone, if there is information that they've made public that you can look up and say, hey, you know, what's their perspective on these? What do they think about these? How can I help them? Do it. Spend some time doing it. Billy. One of the things that he said, I think it was during that debate, was referring to Christians as these arrogant idiots, and how these it's just a bunch of backwards thinking 9-to-5 job people.
That wasn't his follow-up. Yeah, it was really bad.
Follow-up? Okay. We've listened to quite a few of them, but just that mentality of these are just stupid people who I don't really care about, and he's beyond them, again, shows another bit of that personality that's really destructive for himself and also for his followers. Now, his followers can pay attention and realize, well, I got a 9-to-5 job, and I'm the one who's actually supporting him. Because let's be honest, he just took anyone that has a 9-to-5 job or is a Christian or both and thrown under the bus.
Yeah, from what I understand, Billy Carson's platform is not doing very well right now.
I wonder why. Now, if he would have, again, I wanted to give some construction to this as well. If he would have just said, you know what, I screwed up. Some things I've been saying were wrong. I need to re-examine it. Let's walk through my claims in the past and examine them together. And that's his new platform.
Yeah, that'll work.
Ooh, that would be a cool platform. Yeah, that would be awesome.
A lot of people would appreciate that and respect that.
Oh, I could respect that.
So, yeah, and that's exactly what, like we said, Wes had done there too. So now we're going to change gears a little bit and hear from Seth Wallace, who recently returned from a Christian mission in Africa. What challenges did he face? And how can we be inspired to step out in faith like him? So, Seth, you want to give us a real brief overview of what your experience was? And I'm going to throw some of the images that you had from your mission trip up here as well.
Okay, yeah. So for me, this was a complete culture shock because I had, until this trip, never even been out of America. So I really didn't know what to expect fully. The picture here is actually of a diamond mine that was in the area. That's the next one was just some of the countryside. This one was in Germany. We were. Can you make it slow down? It's going way too
Okay, sorry.
It's just like going.
Yeah, no. I just usually have images just like fly by.
Yeah. That's
okay,
fine.
so
That's
if you
fine.
want to address some of these, go ahead, and I will pan through them one at a time.
Well,
for
it was
you.
very entertaining trying to see him catch up and actually keep pace.
I
with
was
it.
having fun with
He
that.
was doing a great job.
He was.
I was
And
impressed.
then we're Germany, and then oh god, I can't give up.
Yeah, so this one right here was from South Africa. I just took that picture because I thought it was interesting to kind of see the differences in the biomes over there. So you had like the jungle areas. You had the other picture that showed it was a very like a mountainous region. Yeah, that one. That was a diamond mine actually. So right there in, I believe it's called Callahan. It's near the Pretoria area. Well, there's like this giant diamond mine there. So we got to like go in there and see everything. We couldn't take pictures of most of the area. So that's the most interesting shot that I have of it. But like you can kind of see the scale if you look at it, like there's like a little tree there and it goes on way, way deeper than that. And then in the other picture, you just have like kind of the countryside. And I just thought it was really beautiful with the clouds and everything. And then you drive a little bit further and the next thing you know, you're in the jungle. So it's kind of like a cool place. And then the church, the cathedral little thing I thought that was so interesting because for me, growing up in North Carolina and living in Tennessee, I had never really been able to see church architecture like this. And so maybe for more people who are more versed in traveling, this is not that extraordinary, but I thought it was really cool. And so we were in Frankfurt, Germany for a day for a layover. And so we got to see the church that was there. And then the next slide shows the interior of that church.
I'm glad you said this is Germany. When I had first seen these slides, I thought, that's in South Africa?
Not this. There's some cool things there, but not that so much. Yeah, so you can go to the next slide if you want. Yeah, so this was a shot coming back into America. I just thought that was really pretty how it showed like the city, electrical grids or whatever with all the lights. And for me, that was really cool because again, I haven't really traveled. So this is like my first time ever looking out the window of a plane at night. So I was just amazed by this. I have so many pictures in my phone that look identical to this one, but you can switch to the next one if you want. So this was a group picture of everybody on the team and at the camp except for me because I got sun sickness or sunstroke. So I am Irish, genetically speaking, and I cannot handle the UV radiation. And so it was not pretty. I was burnt to a crisp and I got really sick. And so I was asleep when they took the group picture. But so that was my down, my low for the trip. But
let me interrupt you real quick. What was the purpose of the trip?
So the purpose of the trip really was to finish setting up a summer camp that this team has been working on for a while now. So I'm a new addition to the team, but annually they've been going like every year for the past few years. And so they started building a summer camp for the kids there because it's a really violent area. And most of the kids there don't even have like running water. It's like literally in that part, the government will bring by like giant barrels of water, which sometimes are contaminated and full of all sorts of dirty things. And that's like what they have to shower with, so like
I wouldn't know that looking at these kids. They look like, I don't know, you see a group of kids in America more or less like this. I mean, the t-shirts, the clothing and everything, you'd think that's, I don't know, somewhere in LA maybe.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Even like one of the kids here in the front has like a NASA shirt. It's kind of funny because there were like a lot of shirts with that were like almost American, but not quite, with like a backwards Nike logo or like a little thing. And like, it's kind of funny because you can tell the companies are like trying to make it look American, but they're not quite getting it right. Or like a slogan in the wrong context or something. But, as normal as they look from the picture, it was really kind of sad, honestly, because as soon as they got to the camp, like, you want to know the first thing these kids wanted to do before anything was take a shower. Like, that was the thing they were excited for, was just to take a shower. And they were like taking 2 showers a day just because they don't get that, in their homes. And the disparity between rich and poor in the entire world is one of the places where there's the greatest disparity is in South Africa. You have some people, particularly the white Afrikaans people, who live very, very wealthy, affluent lives. And then you have these people, mostly the indigenous South Africans, who are very poor. They have next to nothing. And it's literally, you can drive 5 minutes down the road and go from a gated community to a shanty town, just like that. So that was pretty interesting to see, for sure.
Some people would look at that and say, here's evidence of racism, but that may not have been necessarily racism. Would you say that that's the case?
So it's really interesting because living in America, you hear all of this stuff about systemic racism and all of this stuff about, oppression and whatnot. But for those people, I would just say, if you really want to see a system that's not free, where there really is actual racism, why don't you go to South Africa? Because if you think America is just all of this oppression, you should see that, because that is a real example, I would say, of actual racism. And it's not everywhere. It's not everybody. I think really the church is like, Jesus is changing that, because at this camp, there were people who were Afrikaans who were running it. And then there were also South Africans, indigenous South Africans, and they just loved the Lord. They loved each other. They, it's like, you can tell the gospel's changed their hearts. But I did have the chance to speak to some people who are not Christians, Afrikaans and South Africans, and they hated each other. Like the Afrikaans people, actually, they see the indigenous South Africans as like animals that have taken over their country. At least the ones that I spoke to. I'm sure that's not everybody, but the ones that I spoke to, they see them that way. And then the South Africans see the Afrikaans as these oppressors who have just come in and just taken, what was rightfully theirs. And it's really interesting seeing their perspectives, but there is like a lot of tension there, a lot of hate. And even amongst the South Africans, the indigenous groups, like the tribes and the people groups within them, it's like there's a lot of animosity. So like the Zulu and the Xhosa people, they tend to hate each other a lot of times. And you can't even, I can't even tell the difference. If I'm walking on the street, I would not know which one is of which tribe. Like they look the same to me, or to you, but there's so much tension there. It's like, it's crazy. I mean, there's just no cooperation, no harmony, and there's really no freedom to really excel in the economy there unless you grow up in a certain community or group. And so that's why I kind of compare it to America, because people talk about America being so oppressive, but really it's like there's so much freedom here that these people are dying to get. Like they all want to come to America so bad. And they can't. Like they can't even get visas to leave the country if they're South Africans. Like the Afrikaans people can get visas pretty easily, but not them. And so like it's like they're free on paper, but they actually are lacking a lot of opportunities and things just because of like who they are or their people group or where they come from. So that's really sad as well. I'd say it's a very messy situation. And like I said before, the infrastructure is terrible. Like we kept having power outages all the time because their power grid cannot sustain itself. So they have to do something called electricity shedding, where they cut the power grid off in sections to kind of recalibrate the flow of things. And what they'll do is they'll do that in the impoverished areas. So the Afrikaans areas, they don't get this shedding. Like they don't really lose power like that. They'll do it in these more impoverished areas. And so that's like kind of another example of just this sort of discrimination that is very real and alive over there. And the government's very corrupt. Bribery is like, that's king to them. It's like you can unlock any door with the right price.
So what, how did God use you then when you were there?
So when we were there, we were able to really speak into these kids' lives to, love them. I think
while you're speaking, I'm going to play the go through the slides. Just let it slide through. Okay. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we were able to really love them. And I think it was, interesting on their side, being able to see, people who are not their skin color, like actually being kind to them, because they don't really understand like a lot of the differences. Like they see a white person and they just think, oh, these are like the other white people I've seen. But then when you start interacting with them and you're not like the very cold and oftentimes arrogant Afrikaans people that they've been interacting with, and you're actually showing them kindness, it's like, it blows their minds. And the most interesting thing that happened to us there, though, was a spiritual warfare thing. Actually, there was a little girl who was attacked by a demon, and we prayed for her, and the demon left her. So it was paralyzing her from the neck down. And even though she couldn't move, it's not like she was numb, like she was hurting everywhere. From the neck down, and she was like sobbing and crying and like couldn't move. And this hadn't happened to her before, so this was not like some normal medical condition she had. And she was saying that when she had been trying to go to sleep, this thing was like choking her, and so it was very demonic, very bad. And we prayed over her, and that thing left her. And and you don't see a lot of that in the West, I think. And I think it's because here in the West, we have so many physical comforts. We're so focused on the material that a lot of times we're not even looking for the supernatural, or we're so dependent upon our modern comforts and amenities that we just don't really have that much faith, And it's interesting that when Jesus was, ministering, to the people before his crucifixion and resurrection, that really faith was like the barometer for, how many miracles he did, in the areas that he was in. Like there were some places where it said he couldn't do many miracles there because they just didn't have any faith. So I think that's a very important thing. And I think in the West, we don't have as much of that, if that makes sense. And so I think that's why you can go to these remote places and see crazy things happen.
I think that's a subject big enough topic. We can almost take an entire live stream on just talk about why we don't see
where's demon possession
gone? This supernatural here at all in the West versus in other places. Is it whatever, fill in the blank.
I do want to say one quick thing before we move on from that. I think there is a lot of demonic activity here in the West too, but I think it's disguised a lot of times. Like C.S. Lewis talked about this in the Screw Tape Letters, where demons, it's more strategic for them to have one tactic with one people group or one civilization and then a different one over here. And so for us, it's more convenient for them to hide in the shadows. And I think a lot of things that are demonic, we just throw medicine or pills at or whatever, or we just don't even recognize it for that. And it comes in a different form entirely. And so it flies under our radar. And we think, oh, that doesn't happen today, but it does.
Yeah. And I believe we're starting to see more of that now being manifest. So and in C.S. Lewis, he was talking about the ultimate goal is to have the magician scientist who gives, who recognizes the spiritual realm without God.
Mm-hmm.
And ends up praising the enemy. So there's a couple of comments here. I want to one is from Thomas Hall saying that what is the school system like there?
So I think it depends. I personally don't really know what the Afrikaans school system is like. But for the South African kids, I'd say it's decent. Most of them are polylingual, I guess is the word. Like they all are, at least they're all bilingual. They can all speak one of their native languages and English, all of them without exception. So that's really on point that they have there. But most of them can speak like 3 or 4, sometimes even 5 languages. So that's pretty good. They have a basic understanding of, like mathematics, science, things like we would teach here, they do teach over there. So from what I saw in the area that I was in, I would say the schooling is decent, at least for those kids. I personally don't know what it would be like for other areas. I do know that the teachers are not paid much, though. So kind of like here in America, the teachers are actually paid very little. So that is one concern. But the kids seemed pretty smart, honestly.
Another comment was Nicodemus. He pointed out the Hutu and he corrected himself. The Tutsi in, was it Uganda in Rwanda? Also the racism that's there between the different tribes, and that was I think a genocide or massacre that was.
That goes, yeah, even with the Zulu, and I forget the other group, but that goes back to the Zulu. I think if memory serves, they were up in the northern South Africa area, and then came down and invaded. Not long before not the Americans, but the white settlers got there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a mess.
Yeah.
Oh, it is for sure. Yeah, the Zulu I've heard people describe them as, one Afrikaans person compared them to the Roman Empire, honestly, of South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so there's like a lot of messy, history with that too, for sure.
Yeah. So this is good. So you would say that God used you basically. There was, of course, the assistance for building the project and bringing that happening. So there was just the manual labor involved, and like we had earlier talking about make sure I bring this up. We're talking about just God using daily life challenges, just the regular things. Look, it's just replete in the Bible where there's examples of people just going around their daily activities, their daily chores, the necessities of life, and then God using them for that. And here you're building this place, and then in that process, God's using you to show love to these people and help them out with that. So that's good.
Real quick, before we move on, I did hear something just right before we started about a spider. And story behind that, and I was curious the entire time of when that's going to come up.
Okay, so let me see.
There's some sort of story. So I like stories.
All right, so
actually one with the spider, and then something about the taxi cabs there. Both are really funny and interesting. So the spider, I'll start with that. So this right here, this little abomination is called the South African common wall spider.
Ooh, yeah.
Also, they refer to it as a flatty over there because they're very flat and large, in leg span. It doesn't really look like it from the picture, but it's like the big ones are like this big, like the circle that my fingers are making. They're very large and they're extremely fast and they're territorial. And so when we got there, when we got to our housing, on the campgrounds, these things were everywhere. And it was like traumatizing for us. Like they would just be on the wall. Like that's why they're called wall spiders. They will literally climb up on the wall and just sit there. And that's their spot. And if you get anywhere near them, they'll just, like lightning fast, just move across the room.
Are they poisonous?
They are not, thankfully. That was the only good thing is they're not going to it'll hurt if they bite you, but they're not going to make you sick or die or anything. But there were so many of them. They were so fast and big and ugly. And it was just terrifying because you didn't know when they were going to come out. And it was so hard to kill them because they were so fast and they would hide. And so let's say you're trying to go to sleep and that's when they're most active is at night. And so you find one right behind your bed and you try and kill it, but you miss because it's so fast and it goes away. Well, it's going to go right back where it was because they're territorial. So they set up their little spots on the walls and they just sit there. And that's where they live. And so even if they get scared away, they will come back there. So yeah.
I think I'd rather have cockroaches as much as I hate them.
Oh, they had those too. There was this giant.
Oh my gosh, no.
They had wings.
You didn't bring me back with you, did you?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. All right. So you got another story that you want to share with us, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up.
Yeah. So the taxi system over there, we actually started calling it the taxi mafia because they have more power, at least in the parts of South Africa that we were at, than the actual police do. So it's really crazy. The taxis will pull people over and give them citations.
What?
Yes, really. The taxis will a lot of times extort money from people if they just want to for whatever arbitrary reason. They drive how they want to. They will drive on the sidewalks, on the wrong side of the road, whatever. And they literally operate like a crime syndicate. And so, case in point, our team got stopped not once but twice because we were driving out of our territory. So it's like they could tell that we were having transport from one location to another, and we weren't using the official taxi system. So they pulled us over, and this guy got out with an AK-47 and was like, yeah, he was like, no, you're going to have to pay a fine, if you want to continue on, or we're going to hold you here. And so our driver who worked with the camp, was trying to negotiate and finally just had to give him a lot of money to leave. And that was fun. And then the second time, this really personally hurt me. We got stopped again, and this guy, came out again with like gun in hand. And the missionary leader from our team, he was like, hey, do you want this cool drink? And he pulled out this big bottle of cold sparkling water that I had just bought, and he gave it to the guy as a bribe. And so the guy was like he took it, and he's like, this is not a bribe. This is no strings attached. This is just a gift. And our leader was like, yeah, cool drink, just a refreshing cool drink. And so the guy took it, but then he's like happy to have it. He walks off and puts it back in the taxi. And then he comes back and he says, okay, you're free to go. You're free to leave. So then he let us go, but he got my sparkling water out of it. So that was nice.
Okay. I've talked to some people from that area before, and I've heard those sort of stories where it's like if you gave, bribery is a common occurrence, definitely with the cops. And if you gave them what the cops actually really wanted, I think in the example I was told was just like a pop bottle, just some sort of drink.
Yeah.
You could go away with murder. It's like not, and they weren't exaggerating. They're like, that's it. That's all you gotta do. You just give them a little bit under the table.
Yeah.
And they'll take whatever they can get, and you're good to go.
Yeah, bribery is why I hope we never get to that point here of corruption in the U.S.
They were looking at the everyone complaining about the American police being corrupt. It's like, no, they are good.
Yeah. So I got a real quick missionary experience to share with you. In 1982, I was in Honduras, and we were building a boys' home down there as an orphanage, and I was young, very young. I was only 16. So here our truck gets stuck. The roads are terrible down there, and it's outside of Tegucigalpa. And some locals come up to help us, right? And one of the people on our team, this is a short-term mission team. She's a good-looking younger lady. I don't know. She must have been early 20s or something like this. And one of the guys over there comes up and starts up. Now, I know a little bit of Spanish from school, and I was very happy to practice my Spanish at any time. This guy comes up here and starts talking, and he brings out some money. And what the rest of the crew is trying to get the truck out of the ditch. And it starts talking about the money and says, oh, I know what this is. So I'm talking about, okay, here's your money here. This is like, okay, your penny. This is our penny. This is your next unit. This is a nickel. And this is dime, going back and forth like that. And the guy just kept staring at me, looking down, eventually threw up his arms and walked off. And one of the other guys who was working on the truck, they finally got out and says, I'm glad you did that. I said, what? He says, well, he was asking how much she was. He was basically, I thought that maybe she was a prostitute. And he got so frustrated with your long-witted bartering, he just, with penning him down, he finally just took off.
Wow.
I don't know if that was inspired by the Holy Spirit or not. It worked.
The money.
It worked. Get out of there. So let's see. I got one other question here for you. Seth, are you able to keep in touch with the people that you met over there?
Yes, actually. So primarily through WhatsApp. That's what they use over there. So that's a really like handy way to kind of keep in contact. And so we have some group chats and personal chats. But yeah, I am keeping up with them, and Lord willing, I'll be back next year. So that'll be really cool.
You want to go back with this team? Then?
Yes. And I want to learn the languages. I feel like God is putting this on my heart, but I would really like to see the South Africans and Afrikaans come together. And so I don't know if God's going to use me for this one day, but I want to learn the Afrikaans language and the Zulu language, as well as the Tosa language, which Tosa and Zulu are pretty similar. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But I feel like if I can kind of connect with both sides of the divide, you know, maybe God could use me to bring unification and, you know, show his truth through the gospel. So That's something I want to do as well.
Cool. Very good. So when you get down to it, we need to study and walk in the Spirit, avoid the world and flesh. And when the time is right, God will use you in unexpected ways. But in your heart, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense for anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. You have to do it with gentleness and respect. And here we find examples of how God uses people, some people not that ordinary, but uses people in extraordinary ways, and sometimes totally unlooked for, not known. And I think that's for all of us. And we may never know how God has used us as an impossible way until we maybe get to heaven, and then I don't know, there's some holy reruns or something like that we can check out to see how God has used it. Oh, I never realized, but that would be really cool. So I appreciate everybody's input on this.
And that's one thing actually before we go. So
yes.
Nicodemus says, "Oi, the vanity, my friend, you are not going to save the world," but I could be wrong. So just to clarify, I do not think I'm going to save the world, nor do I think I'm going to save South Africa and single-handedly undo generations of problems and turmoil and trauma. What I am saying is that if I could be just even a small piece of God's plan over there, that would be really meaningful to me. And so in wanting to like learn the languages and, you know, connect with both sides of the divide, if I could literally change one person's life, maybe one on each side, like to me, that is changing the world, because who knows what that person will do. And then if they reach somebody, who knows what that person will do. And it's like, it's not any of us anyway. Like I am nothing. Like anything that I have good in me anyway would be just from God. You know, anything that I could do potentially or have done is God working in me. So I just want to clear that up. You know, there's no vanity from me at all in this. And if it sounds like that, then I apologize. That's not what I meant. Yeah, I just want to, you know, glorify God, and it's something I'm passionate about, just like seeing these people, like I love them, you know, on both sides. And so if I could just be used as a small part of that, small or big or whatever, God get the glory. And, you know, I'm thrilled with that. So
that's good. Yeah, it would be a really good study to go through in the New Testament and look at all those times where the Gospels say that Jesus, and then he had compassion on them, and something happened, a miracle, the feeding of the 5,000, whatever the deal is, where he does that, and to see God's heart for people in those situations, how he extends that for us as well. So, yeah, fantastic. So coming up, we have in the next, I would say tomorrow, we have. I'm going to be on Toon's channel, and I'm going to be joined by somebody else on this too. Maybe, as far as I know, there are some others that are coming, and we're going to be looking at the myth of the Andalusian paradise. This is a question of some people have said that the Muslim Empire in Spain in the Middle Ages shows a great example of tolerance and brotherhood. You know, the Muslims, they just loved us so much. They loved people, and just everybody lived in harmony together. And you know what? We should aspire to that, and to welcome. You know, Europe is welcoming more and more of Islam in, and it's a good thing. We should all cherish that. This is going to turn that on its head and going to look at history, both the first primary quotes of writers and people who lived during that period, and find out that this was not a paradise. No. There's something far from it. And so looking forward to that one. And then we're also coming up, we're on this channel, we're going to do more major challenges for Christians in today's culture, addressing gender, sexuality, and identity, understanding and debating Islam. Go figure. Why is that a big thing now? And creating a counterculture, not just being defensive all the time, but going on the offensive as well. So again, I want to thank everybody for joining, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.